Hey everybody, Mike Griffith here of Dog Nation, and welcome to On the Beat segment here on this Tuesday, 3 o'clock. Apologize, missed that cue there from my producer. And we're going to talk a little Georgia football today. Obviously, the Combine just wrapped up in Indianapolis, and I was up there along with the AJC's D. Orlando Ledbetter, giving you some AJC Dog Nation team coverage of the 2019 NFL Combine from Indianapolis. I'm going to call up on my phone the Dog Nation page, so if you have any questions or comments during this production, feel free to ask. And I may stop and interrupt my own production to answer, and I may just look at the end. But if you got something you want to say, this is the forum to do it. It's a pretty neat interactive way for us writers to hear back from the readers and get a sense of what they want to talk about and answer questions direct. But I'll start out with my narrative, and that is of the Combine. And look, I don't want to get on here and be a Debbie Downer, but the reality of it is there some Georgia guys didn't do real well at the Combine. Now, that said, here's the good news. The Combine is just a part of the process. It's not the end-all, be-all. I think Todd Gurley ran a 4.5 240. Nobody knew that he was going to be this dynamo, and he didn't do much else. So there's one example after another of great players in the NFL that didn't necessarily test out well at the Combine. But it is what it is, and that's what we're going to evaluate today is how the Georgia players did relative to other players there, 389 or 339 or however many there were. And the answer is not well overall. Now, Mecole Hardman had a really good Combine, I thought. You know, he showed some strength with the 17 reps on the bench, and he ran a 4.33 40, most importantly. And teams are looking for a dynamic guy that can do the things of a Tyreek Hill or a Tariq Cohen, and Mecole Hardman may be that guy. I mean, he is a strong, firm player with good speed. I think he could have helped himself coming back for another year, there's no doubt. But these players have to measure the risk of injury versus cashing in now and what their family wants them to do. They have a lot of people that are counting on them to support them in many cases. And so I don't second guess a lot of these players because I think in many cases there are financial considerations. I mean, ask yourself this, you know, whatever job you're working at right now, if somebody came along and said, hey, you've got a chance to take a dream job for 4 years. It's only going to last 4 years. That's about the average expectancy of an NFL player. We're going to pay you $100,000 a year if you go now, or you can wait a year and you'll probably get the same job for $150,000 for 4 years. Or whatever, throw whatever numbers you want out there. You see that what I'm talking about. If there's an opportunity and a window to do something that you've dreamed of doing, it's hard to delay that. Now, that said, the University of Georgia is a great experience for these players, and certainly the education matters. But now it's set up where the players can always go back and finish the education. The window to play in the NFL may not be there if they suffer an injury. I'm neither a proponent or opponent of it. It kind of is what it is. I think it's each individual's player's decision to make. Now, that said, sure, some guys get bad advice. I think Isaac Nauta right now is probably rethinking his decision. Isaac is a really smart guy. He's a really good football player, but he ran a 4.9 140, and that's not good for a guy that weighs in at 244. He wasn't explosive on the vertical jump either. It wasn't a great Combine for Isaac Nauta. Now, he's a football player. He's going to go out there and block and catch the ball and run great routes. He's got super hands. It reminds me a lot of Jason Witten was a guy that was told to come out early. He was told by his agent to be a first-round pick. Went in the third round. And a lot of people said maybe Jason Witten should have waited another year. Things worked out okay for him. And as long as Isaac Nauta gets on a team, he's the type of player, he'll be fine. But if you're going to ask me to evaluate his Combine, it wasn't good. He didn't test well. Elijah Holyfield. I know a lot of readers have asked me about Elijah, and, at the start of the year, I questioned his ability to play in the NFL because I didn't think he had speed. And he ran a slow 40. Now, what he's shown me since then, and NFL scouts, is he's a tough guy. He's a physical guy, And yeah, you could say that 5'10", 215-pound guys are a dime a dozen. But I think Elijah Holyfield has a little bit more to him than most of those 5'10", 215 guys. He's very strong. He'll play special teams. He's hungry. He's a great locker room guy. He's a team leader. And so while maybe that 4.76 might have cost him some money in terms of where he gets drafted, he's another guy that, like Isaac Nauta, I believe if he gets on a team, he'll make it because he's a tough guy and he's hungry and he works hard. Now, Riley Ridley, his times in the 40, 4.59, 4.6, they weren't great. They were far off the pace of his brother Calvin at 4.43. Now, Riley's a bigger, more physical guy, but Riley also, some of the other drills, not the vertical jump he wanted to see. I think Riley Ridley had an opportunity to improve his stock, and I think just the opposite. I think his stock dropped a little bit. You don't hear the same buzz about Riley that you did going in. And, you got DK Metcalf, the guy from Ole Miss, 227 pounds, running a 4.3, 340. Now, Metcalf didn't do any of the shuttle runs, so they don't know about how he moves. But that's the kind of eye-opening, eye-popping numbers when you ask if a guy improved his stock. Like I said, I think Mecole Hardman did. Ledbetter didn't run well. He was over 5 seconds. He came in wanting to run a 4.6 or 4.7. I mean, he was a half a second off of that. And what's amazing about that is a lot of these players go to these renowned speed coaches and guys that train you to run the 40. Heck, Elijah Holyfield worked out with Christian Coleman, the fastest man in the world. Christian, I think, ran a 4.12 40 not too long ago. He's amazing. Former track champ at Tennessee, kid from Atlanta. So you can have all the training in the world, but those are track events, and some of it translates to the NFL, but not all of it. And so that's why I said I don't want Georgia fans to get too caught up in it, but it is a part that the NFL is going to look at, just like the Texas game film, right? Just if you're going to evaluate the Georgia football season, and if I were going to evaluate Georgia 2018, I'd say they had a good year. Not a great year, not a bad year. I think they had a good year. I think that November stretch of football, Georgia was playing as well as anybody in the country, and certainly for 3 quarters against Alabama, Georgia looked like a team that could win a national championship. Now, from the 4th quarter on and into the Sugar Bowl, it wasn't good. But a big part of that was DeAndre Baker sat out, and so did DeAndre Walker, who had an injury. So let's talk about those two guys now. First, let's talk about Walker. Talking with D. Orlando Ledbetter, he talked with scouts frequently in his coverage of the Falcons, and they look at Walker as a guy and say, well, what is he going to do for you? He's not really big enough at 250 to be a run-stopping end. Those are usually around 280 pounds. Is he quick enough to be a speed rush guy with 7.5 sacks? I'm not so sure, and there's a question there. You move him back to linebacker, does he have the coverage skills that he needs? DeAndre Walker will tell you that's something he's got to work on. Does he have the speed and quickness to play out in the flats and match up with a running back out of the backfield or a slot receiver? Probably not. So he's kind of a tweener guy, and what makes it just horrible for DeAndre Walker is he had that surgery on January 23rd, still not cleared to work out yet, hopes to be back March 20th, but even then, are we really going to see DeAndre Walker at 100% at Georgia's Pro Day on March 20th? Probably not. So DeAndre's going to have to hope he can get in with a team, have an interview. All it takes is one team to like you. But he's a guy right now, that if you're a Georgia fan, you need to worry about or pray for or whatever you do for these players, because with that injury, that groin injury he suffered against Alabama, and then the real problem was not having it diagnosed fast enough to have the surgery until right before the Senior Bowl. DeAndre put the pads on. He wanted to play in the Sugar Bowl so bad. He tried to practice. He put the pads on for the Sugar Bowl. He was hoping, that it would just feel better. It didn't. And then he started to work out, and it wasn't until the week before the Senior Bowl that he realized he wasn't going to be able to play in the Senior Bowl, and they got another opinion and found out that he needed a surgical procedure. So he had that done in Birmingham on his birthday, January 23rd. So I know a lot of people got a hope for DeAndre Walker that he's going to be able to work out March 20th at Georgia Pro Day. That's going to be big to him. DeAndre Baker had rolled into the combine, I think, most people thinking he was the number 1 corner. And I think a lot of teams are still going to think that. Here's the problem, and it is a problem. It's a good problem in a way. Two problems. One, the combine performance. It wasn't great. He ran a 4.52. I think he really needed to be in that mid 4.4 range. They want to look for speed. His vertical wasn't good. Just not explosive. Didn't look as explosive as he needed. And Greedy Williams, the young corner from LSU, who didn't play as well as Baker in run support this year, he goes out and runs a 4.37. Now you might say, well, look, Mike, right now Baker is a better player than Greedy Williams. And I would say you're absolutely right. And you might say to me, DeAndre Baker is a senior and he's been coached up by two of the best in Mel Tucker and Kirby Smart. And I'd say you're right again. And you'd say he's a man, he's matured. This Greedy Williams guy, he's a young guy. I'd say you're right. So here's what the NFL teams say. Who has the higher ceiling? How much better can DeAndre Baker really get when you look at what he's done at Georgia and when you look at who he was coached by? Versus Greedy Williams, leaving LSU early, maybe not getting the same expertise coaching, running a faster time, being taller. He's got a higher ceiling. So part of the draft isn't just who's the best right now. It's who has the higher ceiling. And I've had scouts tell me, whether it was when I covered Michigan State, they had a DB coach named Harlan Barnett up there, unbelievable coach, now at Florida State. But a tremendous secondary coach. Mark D'Antonio, a former Saban assistant like Kirby, has coached DBs forever. Those are two of the best DB coaches in the country. And Michigan State guys would get hurt because scouts knew they were coached so well, there wasn't a lot of ceiling left. And that can work against Alabama and Georgia guys too. So I'd look for that with Baker. If I had to guess, I'd say second half of the first round. Now, again, these guys are going to get to work out again on March 20th, and that pro day is going to be very, very valuable to them. So I'm going to go look in here now and see if y'all have asked me any questions on Facebook Live. We've had plenty of other stories since then, if you may want to talk about. Let's see here. It's interesting. I did a story today on what DeAndre Baker and McCole Hardman and Isaac Nada said about moving the Georgia-Florida game to Jacksonville, and Hardman and Baker are for it. I had a reader on there just really attack me. And I said, he said, why don't you just be quiet? Well, is it okay if I ask the players? I mean, is it okay if the players give their opinions on the game? Ultimately, it's going to come down to Greg McGarity and Kirby Smart. More on Kirby Smart. Kirby's going to set things up as he sees fit. And it doesn't matter what some sports writer or some fan or some player says, right? There's one boss over there. His name's Kirby. And that's what's going to happen. And I don't know. Just to be fair, I don't know. And I don't know what direction Kirby's leaning, but I know that he's talked about. There seems to be a little confusion on this. So when Georgia and Florida play in Jacksonville, any player can drive there on their own and get a ticket and watch the game. But that's not the same as an official visit. On an official visit, the school can bring in the family. They pay for the trip, put them up in a hotel, take them out to eat, walk them around the campus, let them hang out with the players, spend some time in Athens. Okay, that's an official visit versus go sit in the end zone of the Jacksonville game and coach will talk to you for 5 minutes after the game and then they're on the bus. So you're giving up an official visit weekend every other year when you play that neutral site game, the way Kirby looks at it. And he said on his radio show, hey, that could be 4 or 5 players that commit that weekend. And how important would 4 or 5 players be? So that's the argument against it from how does it help versus hurt the team. How does it help the team to play there? It really doesn't. Okay. How does it hurt the team? You lose an official visit every other week. Now, the difference financially, and talking with Greg McGarity again today to get the numbers right, you lose $3 million over 2 years, so like $1.5 million a year is what you lose, and that's a significant amount of money. But in the grand scheme of $140 to $120 million athletic budget, it's really not a big deal. I know fans have a lot of passion about this, and I'm sure they all have their perspective on it, one way or the other. But that's kind of the story of why you do, why you don't, what's at stake, what's to be gained versus what you lose, and that's what Kirby said. John William Adams, were you surprised the 3 combine receivers included Landers and didn't mention Robinson on the audio I heard? John, I had that thought. I wondered why they didn't talk about
Demetrius Robertson. Maybe because they thought we were talking about young guys that haven't really done it yet. They did mention J.J. Hallman, though. So, yeah, unless, Demetrius Robertson has more to prove as far as his blocking, and they know that's going to be a hurdle for him. I can't speculate. Kirby Smart said towards the end of last year that he was working hard. He was just behind a lot of guys in the receiving room. So that'll be something certainly. Demetrius Robertson is going to be a big story that we're all going to ask Kirby about and keep up with all spring, I'm sure. A former 5-star guy with that kind of world-class speed, you got to wonder how or when or if Georgia gets him on the football field. So that's a good question. I had the same observation there. Ogletree didn't have a great 40, but plays with game speed, Douglas Lambert says. No doubt, like I said, there's guys that haven't tested out the best. I think Roquan Smith ran a 4.58. Gurley ran a 4.52. The combine is an opportunity to just present one side of yourself. Okay, again, it's not the end all be all, as I said at the beginning of this video cast, but it is a measurement. And if you're a GM sitting back and it's close between two guys, maybe you lean towards the guy that's a little bit faster. Clint Walker says, did Ridley improve his stock? I don't think he did. 4.59, the 40s didn't do much. The vertical wasn't great. He didn't stand out from the other receivers. And that doesn't mean he necessarily damaged it horribly, but you don't hear the first round buzz with Riley Ridley coming out of the combine that you heard going into the combine. Thomas Dozier says Falcons need to pick up Nada, get him at the discount now, 5th or 6th round. Thomas, I think you're right. I think Isaac's going to be a steal for somebody. I think the New England Patriots are a team to watch. I think the Philadelphia Eagles are another team to watch. Again, I think Isaac's a great football player. All he does is produce. I know he was puzzled. You can go on his Twitter account. He was absolutely bewildered by his performance. This is a guy who's not used to failing. It absolutely shocked him, I could tell. And who knows why? Who knows what happened? I can't speak to that. I don't know. Maybe these guys just had a bad day. I don't know, but a lot of them did for Georgia. At least the guys that didn't show will have a chance to improve at our pro days, Zach Smith says. That's right. And, so will Jason Stanley, and so will Natrez Patrick, and so will Nick Moore. Those are 3 guys who have a chance of playing in the NFL that didn't even get combine invites. So keep an eye on the long snapper. Keep an eye on Jason Stanley. He's got a lot of speed. I asked DeAndre Baker, I said, now that we're here, who are the fastest guys? Other than you, because Baker's got a lot of confidence. And he mentioned Tyson Campbell, and he mentioned Jason Stanley were 2 of those guys, and he mentioned Nicole Hardman. So I thought that was interesting that those were the 3 guys that he mentioned. Willie Gray Jr., why is the 40 times so significant? Didn't it start because they wanted to see because of kickoff and punts? I'm not sure how that got to be a standard measurement, but you also see like the 10-yard split in there. I think you're just looking for explosion. You're looking for guys that can accelerate. Those guys have a tendency to get to the corner a little bit faster. If there was one thing about Elijah, let's face it, he didn't hit the corner like Swift did. And Swift is world class. Now we're going to see Swift at the combine next year, by the way, barring an injury. Look for DeAndre Swift and a few other juniors to be there next year. Keith Finley says, Nada being drafted is in doubt. Maybe, I don't know. How far did he slide? I know Bucky Brooks had him number 4 at tight end going in. Certainly he's not there now. I just think with Isaac's production in hands, and again, this combine is one portion. These players are going to get called in by teams for individual workouts. So these teams are going to be able to put them under the magnifying glass. They're going to see things we don't see. We put a lot of emphasis on the combine because it's televised now and all the results are handed out. So we're all keeping score. But remember, the Pro Day, March 20th, and the individual workouts that teams have. And I just think Isaac Nauta is such a high IQ football guy, great hands. He caught 30 of the 31 balls thrown his way last season. That was the highest catch ratio on the team. Jim Chaney even said that he was a dummy for not throwing to the tight ends more. And Isaac Nauta, all he did was produce in the big game. So I'm not ready to say Isaac Nauta is not going to get drafted, but do think his stock probably dropped at the combine, and he'll look to improve that at Pro Day. Let's see what else we got here. Any other questions? Again, I just thank Ingles for giving us this opportunity. Our sponsors mean everything to us, guys, and Ingles Supermarket does such a great job. And the fact that they stand behind Dog Nation and have this interest in Georgia football enables us to reach out and talk to you like this. Whether you agree or disagree with me, you get to hear an opinion and hopefully some information that'll give you some perspective and kind of give you a leg up in the conversation with your friends when you're talking Georgia football. It's not being there yourself, but hopefully it's the next best thing, and I can give you information on things that you will want to know. John William Adams, does Georgia have a combine preparation program? Not really. Most of these guys go off. Some of them went to South Florida. Some of them went to Dallas. Some of them were in California. There's trainers that specifically train these guys for combine workouts. So I'm sure if they wanted to stick around and work out at Georgia, they could. But most of them choose to get individual trainers or go into programs that are designed specifically for NFL combine prep. Willie Gray says Kirby isn't a big risk taker by throwing the ball deep a lot. That's not a bad thing. That's just how Kirby coaches. I don't think we have another AJ Green player type. Willie, I don't know about that. I think the offense plays a high efficiency brand of football. But I wouldn't say that Kirby doesn't like to do that. I think he picks his spots, and also I think Jake Fromm picks his spots, and a lot of that's up to Jake and his read. So I wouldn't put all that on Kirby. I think Kirby likes vertical offense. But to your point, next year I think you're going to see more up tempo and more West Coast. Justin Gilliland's joining us. He wants to know if DeAndre Baker's draft fell. I don't know that it fell. I just don't think it improved. I think Baker's been middle of the first round to late first round the whole time. I know there have been some talk about him creeping up to number 10, but that Greedy Williams length and size and that 40 that Greedy ran at 4.37, that's a lot of potential there. So I think DeAndre's going to go where DeAndre's going to go. I think he's going to be a mid to late first round pick, Pittsburgh Steeler kind of guy. Tampa Bay, I don't know. We'll see where he goes. Seattle Seahawks, the team. We'll see where he goes. Just guesstimating that. J.R. Reed was mentioned to me that the speed at 21 on the GPS. Yes, they do track the players' speeds in practice. And J.R. Reed is a really special player. Thank goodness for Georgia that he came back. Absolute glue to the back of the secondary, team leader, defensive leader, and I expect JR to have a huge year, be a Thorpe Award candidate coming out of the gate, and probably maybe a second or third round pick next year. So they're flashing the prompts at me. They're telling me I got to cut it off. I want to thank you again for joining us. If you've got more questions, feel free to type them in there. I look at all the comments when they're done, even the mean and ugly ones, and I try to take note and respond. And you can also follow me on Twitter at MikeGriffith32. And tonight, a little treat for you at 6:15. I'll go on the Paul Feinbaum show on the SEC Network. There's no telling what Paul's going to ask. I always compare going on Paul's show to getting on an airplane in the sense that you never know what kind of ride you're in for. If it's going to be smooth or if he's going to ask you some pressing questions. Just remember, a lot of times they'll put out those little tweets of what I said. They'll just give you that little bit. They don't give you the whole context of it. So I'm a little worried every time I go on Paul's show. You never know what he's going to put on Twitter. But I'll do my best to make sure that I get all the information properly and represent things as they really are, at least through my lens at Georgia. So everybody, have a great Tuesday. Thanks for joining me here on the Ingles on the Beat segment. And I'll be back next week talking more football. And again, follow me on Twitter at MikeGriffith32. And we'll have a story tonight up on the receivers that the outgoing receivers say that we should look for next season. Have a good one.